The United States just did something it hasn't done since the purchase of Alaska in 1867. But this time, there are no troops, there are no tanks, there isn't even a declaration of war. Instead, there is a check for $500 billion. While the world was watching overseas conflicts, Donald Trump just made an offer that could effectively delete Canada as we know it. He didn't offer to invade Alberta, he offered to buy it. And right now, in secret rooms and packed town halls across the Canadian West, the people of Alberta aren't just listening, they're preparing to walk away. This isn't internet speculation. This isn't a conspiracy theory. What I'm about to show you is a documented geopolitical earthquake that was exposed by the Financial Times on January 29th and later confirmed by the U.S. State Department. Imagine a province so fed up with its own federal government that it sends a legal team to Washington, D.C. to ask for a divorce settlement. That is exactly what happened. Since April 2025, officials from the Trump administration have been holding secret meetings with a group known as the Alberta Prosperity Project. These aren't fringe activists. These are organized, funded, and high-level strategists. Jeffrey Rath, the group's legal counsel, didn't just meet with low-level staffers. He told reporters they met with, quote, very, very senior people leaving our meetings to go directly to the Oval Office. Their ask? A $500 billion credit line from the U.S. Treasury. To put that in perspective, $500 billion is more than Canada's entire annual federal budget. It's enough money to build a sovereign nation from scratch overnight. But the real shockwave came when U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent was asked about these meetings on live television. He didn't deny it. He didn't offer diplomatic platitudes. Instead, he said, Albertans are very independent people. They're a natural partner for the U.S. I think we should let them come down. Let them come down. That's not diplomacy, folks. That's a recruitment pitch from the man who controls the world's largest checkbook. As news of these secret meetings leaked, the response from the rest of Canada was instant and explosive. BC Premier David Eby didn't mince words. He called it what it is in the eyes of the law: treason. Prime Minister Mark Carney is now in a desperate scramble. He's demanded that the United States respect Canadian sovereignty. He claims he's been clear with President Trump. But here's the problem Ottawa doesn't want to admit. They might be too late to stop the clock. We are currently in a 75-day countdown. By May 2nd, 2026, the Alberta Prosperity Project needs to collect 177,000 signatures. If they hit that number, by law, Elections Alberta must verify them. And then, a referendum on separation happens in October. You might think, surely Albertans wouldn't actually leave, but the data tells a terrifying story for the Canadian Federation. While 65% currently say they'd stay, look at the fracture points. Among UCP voters, the party currently in power, 57% lean toward separation, but the most dangerous number is the youth. Among Albertans aged 18 to 34, 42% support independence. This isn't a temporary protest, it's a generational shift. And in politics, generational shifts don't reverse, they accelerate. How did we get to the point where a Canadian province is negotiating its exit with a foreign superpower? To understand the $500 billion offer, you have to understand the fury of April 2025. Justin Trudeau's Liberal Party won its fourth consecutive federal election. For Alberta, this was the breaking point. They had voted Conservative overwhelmingly. They had campaigned for a decade to change the direction of the country. And once again, they watched as the election was decided in Ontario and Quebec before a single ballot in Alberta was even counted. The reaction was swift. Premier Danielle Smith introduced Bill 54. On the surface, it was just an Election Statutes Amendment Act, but look closer at what it actually did. It lowered the threshold for citizen-initiated referendums from 20% of voters to just 10%. It extended the time to gather signatures. Smith publicly says she wants to keep Canada united, but she just made the door to exit 10 times easier to open. The question on the paper was simple. Do you agree that the province of Alberta should cease to be part of Canada to become an independent state? Since that day, the momentum has been unstoppable. On January 26, 2026, thousands packed Calgary's Stampede Park. They weren't just waving provincial flags, they were wearing Make Alberta Great Again hats. Some wanted a new country. Others wanted something even more radical, to become the 51st state of the Union. Why would Donald Trump offer $500 billion for a piece of Canada? Is it out of the goodness of his heart? Of course not. It's because Alberta is the greatest energy prize on the planet. Alberta's oil sands produce 84% of Canada's crude oil. The province sits on 166 billion barrels of proven reserves. That is the third largest oil reserve on Earth. Only Saudi Arabia and Venezuela have more. Currently, that oil flows south to American refineries, but it flows on Canada's terms. It's subject to Ottawa's regulations, Ottawa's environmental taxes, and Ottawa's political whims. An American-aligned Alberta changes the global balance of power instantly. Treasury Secretary Besant noted that Canada won't let Alberta build a pipeline to the Pacific. His solution? Let them come down into the U.S. He's right. Northern Gateway was killed. Energy East was abandoned. Trans Mountain was a disaster of delays. Trump isn't just buying oil. He's buying natural gas. He's buying uranium. He's buying critical minerals for semiconductors and batteries. He's buying massive tracts of agricultural land and freshwater, resources that will be more valuable than gold in 20 years. By cutting out the middleman in Ottawa, Trump secures American resource dominance for the next 50 years. It's not a gift, it's an investment with a 1,000% return. Let's play out the scenario. It's October 2026. The referendum passes. 2 million Albertans vote yes. What happens the next morning? This is the part that breaks Canada. Legally, the Supreme Court says a province can't leave unilaterally, but the Alberta separatists have a plan for that. They've worded their petition to comply with the Clarity Act. If Ottawa refuses to negotiate, they are violating their own legal precedents. If they do negotiate, they are admitting Canada is over. An independent Alberta would usually face immediate chaos. They'd need a new currency, a military, a border, and a tax system. That's nearly impossible for a new nation, unless you have a $500 billion credit line and the backing of the world's only superpower. With American help, Alberta's currency is instantly pegged to the U.S. dollar. Their borders are protected by the U.S. military. Their trade is guaranteed. But for the rest of Canada, it's an economic death sentence. Alberta contributes 20% of Canada's GDP. They are the largest net contributor to federal revenues. Every year, billions flow from Alberta to Quebec and the Maritimes to fund their social programs. If Alberta leaves, that money vanishes. Quebec suddenly has a $12 billion hole in its budget. The Canadian dollar collapses. Interest rates spike. Foreign investment flees. And then comes the contagion. If Alberta leaves, why would Saskatchewan stay? They have the same grievances and the same resources. What about Quebec? The Parti Québécois is already watching. If English Canada can break the Confederation, why shouldn't French Canada? Canada in 2030 could look like the Soviet Union in 1992, a collection of successor states fighting over the scraps of a fallen empire. So why isn't Ottawa stopping this? The uncomfortable truth is, they can't. Mark Carney is a man of spreadsheets and central banking. He's trying to use logic against a movement fueled by pure, unadulterated fury and $500 billion in American leverage. He's brought a calculator to a knife fight. He could offer Alberta more autonomy, but if he gives Alberta a special deal, Quebec will demand the same. BC will want concessions. The Federation becomes a permanent hostage negotiation until there is nothing left to negotiate. Meanwhile, in Alberta, the momentum is visible on the ground. Lines are wrapping around buildings in Red Deer, Stony Plain, and Edmonton. 2,000 canvassers are working the streets. And Premier Danielle Smith, she's playing the most dangerous game in Canadian history. When asked if she signed the petition, she simply said, "I'm watching." When asked if her ministers signed it, she said, "They can sign whatever they want." She is using the threat of separation as a weapon. Every signature is more leverage against Ottawa. But she might find that once you start a fire this big, you can't put it out, especially when someone across the border is pouring $500 billion worth of gasoline on it. Donald Trump understood something that the establishment in Ottawa still doesn't. You don't need to conquer territory with an army anymore. You don't need to fire a single shot. You just need patience, a population angry enough to listen, and a checkbook big enough to change their reality. Alberta is angry. Washington has the money. And Ottawa? Ottawa has 75 days to find an answer that doesn't exist. We are witnessing the quiet annexation. It's not loud, it's not violent, it's just efficient. And if the signatures are verified on May 2nd, the Canada we see on the map today might become a relic of history. The clock is ticking. 177,000 signatures, $500 billion. One choice. What side of history will Alberta choose? Make sure you're subscribed, because in Part 2, we're going to look at the secret maps of the new North American borders. You won't want to miss it.